angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology, conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of Skywatch TV. Special Investigative Report.
Almost 100 years ago, 3 children in Fatima, Portugal, claimed to have a vision of the Virgin Mary, who gave them a prophecy of things that were to come. And the third secret was about a bishop in white who climbed a hill surrounded by carnage. What is the relevance to our world today? That's our topic in this special report on the path of the Immortals. I'm Derek Gilbert, Skywatch TV, along with the co-author of the best-selling books Petrus Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, and Exo Vaticana, and the forthcoming book on the path of the Immortals, Tom Horn. Tom?
Great to be with you again, Derek.
We had talked about some threats made against the Pope, against Rome, by the Islamic State, and begun to discuss the relevance to the prophecies of Fatima, and also to the prophecy of the popes, which you deal with extensively in Petrus Romanus. The prophecy, and I guess we kind of use that word loosely as Protestants, and we'll talk about the weight that we give extra biblical prophecy here in this program. But the message, the third secret of Fatima and the bishop in white, what was that third secret, and how seriously does Pope Francis take this?
I think he does take it. Well, of course, you left off on the last show talking about how he, dedicated
his papacy and also consecrated the world to what he calls what Roman Catholics call the Immaculate Heart of Mary. But he did it in front of the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, which he had brought from Portugal to Rome for this ceremony on October 13th of 2013. And of course, that statue has the bullet that struck Pope John Paul II during the assassination attempt embedded in the crown of the statue. So,
and the relevance of that, of course, is that if people understand the part of the prophecy that was published. Now, Rome claims that it published the entire third secret, but there were many scholars, actually, of the third secret of Fatima, people that actually had the opportunity to read it. We're talking about, highly placed bishops or cardinals that had access to it. That had indicated it said much more than what was promulgated in the year 2000. 1981, there's a guy that tries to assassinate John Paul II. And in the year 2000, John Paul II is the one that authorizes the release of the third secret of Fatima. Now, that secret was supposed to be released a long time ago. Lucia, or Lucy Santos, had been told by the angel or by Mary that it was to be kept a secret until around the 1960s, and then it was supposed to be published.
Yeah.
Her bishop...
And actually, when she was asked about that, she said that it was Mary that told her to hold the first 2 secrets until, was it 1940 or 41?
Right.
But that it was on her own initiative. She just felt that the third secret would not be understood until sometime after 1960.
Yeah,
so she's the one who made that decision.
Yeah, that was actually what she said. She said at that time, world developments will be such that the prophecy can be more clearly understood.
Right.
But her bishop read it, ordered it sealed, and actually Lucy, she only died a few years ago, and she was essentially kept under house arrest. She was not allowed to talk to the public about the secret whatsoever.
Right.
The Secretary of State, Tarcisio Bertoni, would go and visit her on a regular basis. There's some evidence that even threats were made that would come from her Catholic faith. In other words, you might not get out of purgatory as quick as you want to if the prayers are not being said. So
that was significant because at the time, the then Archbishop Bertoni was the head of the congregation which was responsible for enforcing or protecting official Roman Catholic doctrine.
Right.
So he was essentially the guy who made the final call on what was and what was not official Roman Catholic doctrine.
Right. And so the secret isn't released in the 60s because the powers that be determined that whatever the secret is, it's too troubling, it's too disturbing. And there were radio shows, by the way, Malachi Martin, he was a highly placed Jesuit. He worked for 3 different popes. He was a polyglot. He translated the Dead Sea Scrolls for the Holy See. A highly educated guy. And after he was relieved of his priestly duties on request of the Pope, becomes a best-selling author, and he's writing these books out there. And some of his books are, I mean, they're very maverick. They're saying things about Rome becoming the seat of the Antichrist, and about the enthronement of the Archangel Lucifer at the Vatican, and all these things he's saying. And then he would be on TV and on radio. And one of the shows he was on, somebody called in one day and they asked him about the third secret of Fatima, and they said they had heard that the third secret had to do with Rome becoming apostate and becoming the seat of the Antichrist. And Malachi, and you can still listen to the audio file, he says, yes, it sounds like they have read the third secret of Fatima, which he had access to. Well, that's contradictory to what was published in the year 2000 when John Paul says we're going to release the third secret, and it describes the bishop in white. A bishop in white, he's walking through a city that is, sounds like it's been bombed or it's been hit by a meteorite or something has happened because the city is just in ruins, half in ruins.
Corpses everywhere.
Corpses everywhere, people dying everywhere. He's walking along praying for the people as they're dying, and he's trying to make his way to a cross. And at that time, ISIS-like fighters run into the city and they shoot him, right? And they kill him. So in 2000, you had Cardinal Ratzinger, who went on to become Pope Benedict. He was part of the committee. Sodano, Tarcisio Bertoni, right. They're all part of the committee working under Pope John Paul II. And they say they're going to release the third secret. Well, when they release the third secret, all they give is that description of the city and the bishop in white, and they say this was fulfilled in 1981 with the assassination attempt against John Paul.
But Our Lady guided the bullet and preserved him and stopped him at the threshold of death. And that's why they put the bullet in the statue of Our Lady of Fatima and the crown of Our Lady of Fatima. Yeah.
And so you had Catholic scholars, you had the Washington Times, you had the New York Times. They're all running articles saying, excuse me, first of all, he wasn't walking through a city half destroyed. He was riding the Pope Mobile. He wasn't killed like the vision says that he was, and there were no other dead people. Nobody else was shot, so it didn't match even the part of the vision that they released. Now, but is that vision something that the current Pope believes could be fulfilled by the Islamic nation? See, that's what I think. That's why I think that you hear Francis right now saying, I am willing to be assassinated if that is God's will. I just hope it doesn't hurt, because I think he's a believer. Furthermore, I think he's a believer in the prophecy of the popes, which also, that final line describes how that during this pope's time on the throne of Peter, the city of Rome is destroyed, and presumably him along with it, right? So it seems to match the Fatima prophecy. And I think he's a believer in that prophecy. I think he thinks at this time he's playing his role as the final pope. Here's the thing to keep in mind about Pope Francis is he carries himself as a very humble man. And he might be a humble man, but he's not an ignorant man. He's a Jesuit. He's got advanced degrees in science, in history. He's fully aware that he is the final line in a 900-year-old Catholic prophecy that has meant a lot to a lot of cardinals down through time. Popes have even gone out of their way at times to show that they were the fulfillment of their line in the prophecy of the popes. Even documentaries made to show that I'm the one that was in the prophecy of the popes. So they do pay a lot of attention to it. And as a Jesuit, he's following a mystical path, a prophetic path, and so I think he believes in it.
Now, the Jesuit order has come under some criticism. Malachi Martin, who was a Jesuit, was maybe one of the few, maybe the only, as far as I know, ex-Jesuit relieved of his priestly duties. The Jesuit order throughout history has been evicted from a number of countries around the world, including some countries that are officially Roman Catholic, like Spain. What is it that the Jesuits are about that the governments find so offensive? I mean, are they engaged in more than just religious education?
Well, absolutely. Of course, a lot of universities that were built by the Jesuits, the purpose was to form an anti-Reformation movement, right? When the Reformation was growing and the Catholic Church was losing lots and lots of people to what we today would call evangelical Christianity, the Jesuits were actually formed to become an arm of the Vatican to turn that turn that curve back around, to bring people back under the fold. They were an anti-Reformation, but it included universities, intellectualisms. They would slowly, if you can control the mind and the thinking and the philosophy of the world at large, then you can control everything else. Malachi Martin also said in his book, The Jesuits, that they wanted to control the Vatican in particular. Mm-hmm. And he said there was a secret war going on between the Jesuits and the other priests. And he says that if ever the Jesuits were to take control of the Vatican, well, essentially that would be the end. That's when it becomes just a machine, he says, of the New World Order, an arm of the Antichrist. And he must be rolling over in his grave today, or he must be rolling over in purgatory, to know that the very first Jesuit pope in history just took the throne. So obviously the Jesuits won that war.
And just coincidentally, after the first pope in 600 years resigned.
Right.
Generally, the popes don't resign. They're essentially carried out of the Vatican.
Which is, by the way, it's interesting because this whole special investigative report, this is going to go on for we don't know how many shows, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to have Chris Putnam here in the next program. He'll do a couple of shows with us. We'll have our field investigators here, and we'll start showing video and film from the field investigations that'll ultimately lead up to us talking about what in the world is this book On the Path of the Immortals all about, right?
Well, we'll show you a little glimpse of that. We'll also talk about the Pope's geopolitical initiatives. He, as Tom mentioned, will be Pope Francis, that is, will be addressing the United States Congress. He's also released a very interesting encyclical that, again, has nothing to do with religion. We'll talk about that as our special investigative report On the Path of the Immortals continues next on Skywatch TV.
Now we're on our way to the petroglyphs. There are some strange images that are there.
Yeah. I saw it with the naked eye. Yeah. Did you see it? The orb. I saw an orb with the naked eye. What is that?
In 2012, they shocked the world when they predicted Pope Benedict's resignation 1 year in advance. In 2013, they uncovered the mysteries of Mount Graham, the Lucifer device, and the Vatican's secret plan for the arrival of an alien savior. For the last 24 months, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam have been working behind the scenes on their most guarded project and greatest discovery yet. Mount Graham in Arizona is said to be a portal, and the Jesuits admit they are monitoring something there that is approaching the Earth. But as the Vatican knows and the authors just uncovered, this mountain is not the only gateway to another dimension. Now, in their new book, On the Path of the Immortals, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam set out with cameras and field investigators to document the most astonishing evidence of those behind the veil. Armed with inside intelligence from the native peoples, they unearth chilling evidence of what the Bible says about sacred locations and the giant beings that await their time from within.
They claimed that they could actually conjure light ships down, UFOs, aliens.
So what would have caused these ancient Pueblo Anastasi Indians to have departed this area with such great haste?
We don't know why they never finished completion of the Sun Temple.
Many of them escaped right through some of these mountains, some of these old Anasazi ruins.
Travel with internationally acclaimed investigative authors of Petrus Romanus and Exo Vaticana to learn the truth behind a secret so fantastic that it took 2 years and thousands of miles of research to document what has been kept hidden from the public by elitists and intellectuals who are planning mankind's assimilation under a coming savior.
Here's the six-toed giant our Indian guide told us about. And there's the fallen reptilian with the halo above his head that came through the portal.
One whom the prophet Daniel foresaw as an alien god. On the Path of the Immortals.
Pope Francis addressing the United States Congress and issuing an encyclical that deals with how we live our everyday lives. What is this all about? Welcome back to our special investigative report on the path of the Immortals on Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert, along with Tom Horn, co-author of the forthcoming book On the Path of the Immortals. Pope Francis, addressing climate change. What does that have to do with religion, our Christian faith, our relationship with Jesus Christ?
Well, not much, I would say, frankly, from my worldview. I think that we as Christians obviously would say that we have a responsibility to be good stewards of creation, everything that belongs to God. But the encyclical, and we haven't seen the encyclical yet. It may be out by the time this show broadcasts. It's supposed to be any day now. Originally, I think they said it'd be during March. But there are some concerns, not just among evangelicals, but also among some conservative Catholics. One is the point we already made, that it kind of joins the church to political issues,
right?
Which is a concern because, this could smack of the Antichrist system. In the book of Revelation, when it describes the rise of the Antichrist, you have a political figure, but then you also have this second beast that it talks about with two horns like a lamb, which scholars think that infers that he pretends to be a representative of Jesus Christ, right? The Lamb of God. But it says he speaks as a dragon, so the voice behind the voice, his power is Luciferian in nature. And of course, ultimately, in the same parts of the book of Revelation, it doesn't take long for that to be betrayed when he starts causing all who won't worship the image of the beast to be killed.
Right.
But
when you marry church and state, then a disagreement over theology becomes treason.
Right. With Chris Putnam and I writing The Prophecy of the Popes, which predicted the resignation of Pope Benedict 1 year in advance, even to the month. We could get into that if we need to, or maybe wait till Chris is here. But that caused the world essentially to look at that book and to start asking some of these questions. Then we wound up in Exo Vaticana. In Exo Vaticana, we mentioned something that might be connected to this encyclical. And it takes a moment to understand this. When you start talking about environmentalism, you wonder what in the world could that possibly have to do with Exo Vaticana, which is talking about life on other planets.
Right.
But along this path we've taken, we've wound up with some conservative Catholics, including a couple of priests that are willing to converse with us via email. And one of them said, watch to see if there's anything in the encyclical that connects to this idea of many worlds. And among the Catholic scholars, there are a lot of them. Benedict was one of them that believed that there could be something to this idea of many worlds, that we're one world of many. God has many more out there where our space brothers are. But among this coalition of worlds is a responsibility to nature, is a responsibility to creation. A good way for people to understand this idea is, remember the old classic film, The Day the Earth Stood Still?
Ah, yes, Klaatu, Barada Nikto.
Yeah.
Yes.
It scared the majeebies out of me when I was a kid, right?
That's what had Gary Stearman started on his career path.
Right. Well, but now in that original one, the classic, which is still the best one that was ever made, the issue was nuclear armament. We were building nuclear arms, and so, the big space alien with his robot comes down here to warn us that if ever we think we're going to extend that military presence or bombs or whatever into space, we're going to become a burned out cinder, I think he says. They're going to wipe us out. But that film was remade a couple of years ago, starring Keanu Reeves, and it was a very subtle change, right? He comes down, he's got the giant robot, but now the whole issue is environmentalism. And this is very much taken from some of the Catholic thought about many worlds, that the angels are watching, our space brothers are watching, God is watching, and we have a responsibility to the environment. And that's a very close step to saying we are the disease. That's essentially what the spaceman in the remake of that film says. We are the disease. And this goes, of course, into Gaiaism. Will what the Pope says in his encyclical, will it hint at this idea that the Earth is a living, sentient organism?
Well, that's really interesting because the previous Pope, Pope Benedict, in a homily in 2009, praised the work of the Jesuit Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who is called by some the father of the New Age movement, but also called by some the father of the Internet, because it was he who first coined, a couple of terms that we're very familiar with. One is transhuman, and the other is social network. And he believed that he believed in evolution, and he tried to reconcile that with his faith by postulating that creation is evolving, and that as it evolves and our social networks become more complex as humans, as the world around us, the biosphere, becomes more complex, that it becomes sentient, and that at some point we will all wake up, become one with the universe and the omega point. So, and Pope Benedict actually said that the role of the priesthood was to consecrate the earth into a living host, which in Roman Catholic catechism, the host is literally the body of Jesus Christ, miraculously transformed from a wafer into his body during the Mass. So there is some thought there that perhaps this influential Jesuit thinker, Teilhard, is influencing current Roman Catholic thought, and that our role on the planet is to, again, shepherd the planet to our next stage of evolution. There may be some connection there to this idea that we are to join this, I don't know, the space brotherhood and becoming one with the cosmic Christ, the omega point, as Teilhard put it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Benedict actually wrote in his own book about Chardin and praised his thinking, which tells you that at least that pope, and it's possible that this current pope, being a Jesuit, and that was what I was told to watch for. Now, since we don't have the benefit of the encyclical yet,
but that is something to watch for in 2015.
It's to watch for in 2015. That and actually, here's what I was told was that, and this is not something mysterious. Oh, Tom's referring to a mysterious informant or something like that. It's just to be watched for. That if something that might smack of astrobiology is not included in this encyclical, look for something later this year. In fact, that can be sourced to the current leader of the VORG, the Vatican Observatory Research Group, Jose Gabriel Funes, gave an interview with the Catholic media recently. Pretty soon, he said he's going to turn his attention to astrobiology. Well, when Funes says that, he would know because they're friends, and they both have an interest. Bergoglio earned degrees in chemistry and had ambitions of actually entering into science fields before he became a Jesuit. So whether it's the encyclical is going to hint at it or later this year, but it's going to take us to the second book, Exo Vaticana, and some of the shows that we'll do when Chris Putnam gets here, because it sounds like they might be preparing us for this coalition of worlds, this many worlds idea, in that maybe they think they know something. And they've been saying a lot of things over the last few years that lead you to believe that they think they know something about disclosure. And of course, again, that goes back to Malachi, 97, when Art Bell says,
right, something coming in possibly the next 10 years.
Right.
Yeah. Or at the very least, they're hedging their bets because it is believed by many that Christians would find their faith rocked if suddenly E.T. were to land on the White House lawn, which isn't necessarily the case, but that's for another program. So we'll deal with those in the forthcoming programs with Chris, the links between the scientific research, the astronomical research, and perhaps these ideas that the ties to how that would affect their positions of faith. But there was something else I wanted to touch on real quick with just a couple of minutes. Last fall, the former president of Israel, Shimon Peres, traveled to Rome and proposed to Pope Francis the idea of a United Nations of religions, with Francis perhaps developing the idea, shepherding the idea to fruition. We're looking perhaps a global unity of the major religions. What is your thoughts on that? Have your research turned up anything on that?
Well, Francis has actually talked about it. So, he's coming to the United States. He's going to speak before a joint session of the U.S. Congress. He's going to speak before the United Nations. But then when he goes back to Rome, he's already announced, I don't know if the date is set yet, but he's announced that he's going to call all of the leaders of the world's major religions together to talk about how we can work together in better cooperation and unity. So once again, this takes you back to this second beast that rises up with two horns like a lamb, but who speaks as a dragon, and this idea that there's going to be a final global religion. It might be kind of loose, but mandatory. An encyclical, for instance, is kind of a mandatory piece of benediction that comes down from the Pope. He gives his encyclical, which he's going to do any day now. It goes to all of the bishops, and then the bishops have the responsibility of passing forward that information to all 1.2 billion Catholics in the world, and it becomes a moral responsibility for them to follow whatever the encyclical is. Well, so this Pope's on a mission, and what might the next encyclical be? What might the next authoritative statement be? He's already telling us that following these things, he's going to get all of the nations, all of the leaders of the religions of the world together. I don't know if that's other than Christian. It might just be all the denominations of Christendom, and talk about how we can form global unity. One very quick thing, I know we're going to run out of time, but people have heard me talk before too about the Zohar 700 years ago. Now this is the most important book of Jewish Kabbalah ever. The Orthodox Jews pay attention to it, and in the Vieira section and in the subsection, the sign heralding Mashiach, or the coming of the Messiah, it said that in the year 5773, which would have been 212 to 213, the new moon of 212 over I think into September of 2013, says that the Messiah would begin making himself known to the Orthodox leaders in Israel, right? And then slowly from then forward start making himself known to the nations of the world. Well, if that prophecy is true, then the Messiah, whoever that person is pretending to be or is, made himself known. So now all of a sudden they're dedicating the altar for the third Jewish temple. And I even wonder, this new television series, Dig, which is implying that there's movement now among the Orthodox priests and others, that what are they going to announce? They found, the Ark of the Covenant.
And the Temple Institute is already putting out articles about the significance of the red heifer and so forth. Right. So we are seeing a culmination. We talked about the Muslim prophecies, especially the apocalyptic Mahdist versions of their prophecies. We're seeing Jewish prophecy, perhaps, coming together, and movement on the part of Rome that indicates that they see something coming that may signal the end times.
Well, and this Zohar, the point that I was going to make is it too sees the destruction of Rome at about that same time. So there is a whole concatenation of prophecies here coming together from the Jews to the Catholics to biblical to Islamic. All of them seem to be coming together at one time.
Yeah, and it's a lot to get your head around, but if you'd like to do it, now is the time, because we're offering, as part of our special report on the Path of the Immortals, a special package that include the first two books in what has become a 3-volume set. Petrus Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, Exo Vaticana, Chris Putnam and Tom Horn's first two books, their forthcoming book, On the Path of the Immortals, which will be released very shortly. All those 3 books together, combined with an excellent primer on the space brother meme, if you will, What Lies Beyond, the author Jeffrey Mardis. Those 4 books plus 2 DVDs, special investigative report on the Path of the Immortals, and Tom Horn's presentation at Chuck Missler's Strategic Perspectives Conference on the secret Vatican and alien Antichrist connection. All of that together, a $120 value for just $39.95. Tom, this will continue. We barely scratched the surface. For Skywatch TV, I'm Derek Gilbert.